Today we'll be going over GCSE, GCSE slash IGCSE 0984 paper 22 from May June 24. Now this question and this also by the way stands for the O levels for all of those who are wondering. Now guys, this question is a basics 15 marker. And I mean, over the span of time, I've seen that a lot of people have actually struggled with 15 markers, primarily because it requires a lot of thought process and all that jazz. Now, the first thing that we need to keep in our minds before starting off a 15 marker question or any other question, as a matter of fact, is that we need to sit down and understand what the question is asking for. Now, I know this sounds cliched. I know this sounds tough, and you just want to get started off. And a lot of times, what happens is that we're like, okay, I don't have enough time, blah, blah, blah. But the truth of the matter is that for such a question, which is a longer question, especially, you can have a lot of marks for it. You don't stand a chance of scoring at all in this, let alone scoring well if you don't understand what the question is saying. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to sit down and we're going to try to understand what the question is saying before starting that off. Trust me, these few minutes are going to be really valuable. Let's get started off. So it says a one-player game uses a two-dimensional array. All right, I know what I'm done. I am given a two-dimensional array. Just a sec. Yeah, okay. I'm given a two-dimensional array called grid to store the location of a secret cell to be found by a player in 10 moves. Each row and column has 5 cells. So right now, what I know is that there is this grid that's given to me. It's a two-dimensional array. I hope we all understand it, but the way our um, two-dimension arrays goes by is that, and it actually has rows and columns. Rows are along the, yeah, sorry. Rows are along this axis. So this is my row number one, row two, row three, row four, and row five. Whereas columns are along the x-axis. One, two, three, four, five. So real quick, in a 2D array, we remember that, and they've already said that grid is a 2D array. So let's say for some reason, if I want to access this particular place, for instance, that's going to be grid, row number, and column number. That's how our 2D array goes by. So it's going to be grid, and it's going to be row number 4 and column number 5. And that makes I can access this. That was a quick thing I wanted to talk about. Now it's a 5 by 5 thing, so it's a five rows, 5 columns that we have in this case. And the player is allowed 10 maximum moves. Each row and column is 5, so we've been through this. At the start, the program places an X in a random cell, not in grid 1. Very important, I need to know. And empties all other cells in the grid. So while we're reading the question, we'll try to make these pointers so that we can actually take them off. And trust me when I say this, more often than not, you'll realize that um, you didn't really have to think about a lot of the solution because all you were doing was sitting down and following what the question was asking for and kind of marking it all off. Anyway, the player starts at the top left of the grid. So basically the top left of the grid is this is where the player starts from. The player has 10 moves, so I know that I have a certain constant, and that constant is going to be 10 moves out there. During the game, the player, sorry, can move. So third pointer, fourth pointer, yeah, the player can move left, right, up or down by one cell, and the move must be within the grid. Of course, very important that it must be within the grid. UN is displayed if the player moves to the cell X and has played 10 moves or less. So yes, we have to make that sure that the player wins, and he's going to win if he's found where the X was and it's still within 10 moves. U lose is displayed if player has 10 moves without finding the X. So generally these are the 8 important pointers I can think about that we'll need to make sure that we're following in this particular question. Write a program that meets this requirement. You must use pseudocode or program code. Now, I hope you guys already understand this, but remember, a good thing about pseudocode is that a little here and there is all right. I'm sure maybe some of you might be doing Python, some of you might be doing Visual Basic, some of you might be doing C Sharp or something like that. The bottom line is that pseudocode gives us this liberty. I can use some program code as well or pseudocode, that's fine. That's one. And very important comments to explain how your code works. Extremely important. Then I'm going to make sure that I have comments along with it as well. Which I put them, which I use them in order to explain this. You do not need to declare any arrays or variables. You may assume that this already has been done. Very good. All inputs and outputs must contain suitable messages. So all of my inputs that I'm taking or all potential outputs that I'm going on by, I need to make sure that they are following they have like suitable messages out there. Okay, now let's kind of break this answer down and just a sec. Okay. And let's go on and start attempting this. So what was the first thing that we had to do? Well, the first thing that it asked us to do, okay, let's start from the real beginning. So the first thing that it made us do, it says that the program places an X in a random cell not in grid 1 1 and empties all other cells in the grid. So basically I want to make sure that the whole grid is empty, and then I'm going to place X in a random cell, and that random cell cannot be one by one, one. So let's firstly do that. So let me just write down a comment, and I'm gonna say emptying all the grid. So let's go on and do that. For emptying all the grid, it's gonna be simple. The whole grid goes from, so I'm gonna say for row equals 1 to 5 and for column equals 1 to 5. What I'm going to do, I just want to empty it so I know grid, and I just explained this on the left. Remember, I know because it's a 2D array, so it's going to be row first and then column, and this is going to be equal to, I'm just going to empty that, and then I can have the end for, all right, and I can have the end for the other one. So I mean, I hope we understand and remember, but this end for is for this one and this end for is for this for. So that's how we went on. We actually did it. We went from 1 to 5, and that's usual way of making sure that we have our we have traversed through the 2D array, which means we've gone through like each one of the um, places in the array. So that's one. So we're done with that part. Now the next thing that we have to do is that we have to place an X randomly somewhere. So I'm going to write down randomly placing the X, ensuring it is not placed in location 1 comma 1. All right, so I want to make sure it's not in location 1 comma 1. So for that, what I'll need to do is I will need to use two built-in functions. I hope we are already aware of this. If not, I'm just going to actually place them here as well. And the built-in functions that we'll be using are going to be the random number generator and the rounding. The reason for that is, let me actually show that to you real quick. Um, Here you go, guys. So this is actually from your syllabus, and I believe we are already aware of it. So the way round works is that I'm going to give it like a certain number over here. I'm going to tell it what number of places I want to round it to, and it's going to go on and round it to those number of places. And on the other hand, the way random works is that it gives me a random number, and the random number actually exists between um, 0 and 1. So it gives me between 0 and 1, and I want to make sure that if I want to get a number which is, let's say, between a certain range, what all I can do is I can multiply with a number. So for instance, if I multiply random with 6, it's actually going to give me a number between 0 and 6. And I want to round it off to, the whole number, so I can give it 0. Because the problem is if I don't round it off, then random multiplied by 6, it's actually going to give me, it can give me not whole numbers, because it's between, because when you get a number between 0 and 1, so let's say I get, I don't know, 0.2, and then I'm multiplying this with 6, it can give me 1.2. So basically I can potentially get decimal numbers as well. So when I'm going to round this, when let's say I round 1.2 to, um, the nearest whole number, it will make it 1. So that's why we need to use this. So let's go on and firstly try to make sure that I can randomly place my x in that in position apart from the first place in the array. So for that, I can do is I'm just gonna simply try to maybe create a row and a column. So let's say I'm just gonna say x row, and I'm gonna say x row is going to be what? I'm gonna say I need to generate a random number. All right, I need to generate a random number, and that random number is going to be between what? A random number. I want to make sure that random number is between 1 to 5. Am I right about it? Because think about it for a minute, it has to be between 1 and 5, right? So what I can say is I can say random multiplied by 4 plus 1, and then this random number, I want to round it to the nearest one. So I'm going to round it to the nearest whole number. I just explain on top why am I going to do that. And the same thing I'm going to reapply below to the column, and I'm going to write the same thing, the same logic behind it. So it says round, and then I've got random multiplied by 4 plus 1 and a 0 here. Okay, now this gives me x row and x column. Now I need to make sure, because see, remember on top we said that it is, I want to make sure that it's not one and one. So I'm going to keep on repeating this. I generated the first time. Well, I might get lucky, hopefully, because it's very less obvious that I'm going to get one and one a lot of times, because the probability of getting others is more. Anyway, but let's say if I get one and one. So I'm going to repeat the whole process. So I'm going to say while x row, x row is what? Think about it. While x row is equal to 1 and x column is equal to 1. So this means if I'm getting x row and x column equal to 1, if both of them are equal to 1, then I'm going to repeat this whole process. So this whole process needs to repeat it, you know, and it will only happen, this whole process is only going to be repeated if I have x row and x column equals 1, because I only want to generate a new random number if I am getting them as equal to 1. And if they are not equal to 1, if they're anything else, well and good. I can just go on. And if it's not the case, which is better, I'm just gonna go on and give the grid. So I'm gonna say in the grid, I'm gonna say grid and x row, comma x column, and I'm gonna place that equal to, sorry, not 1. I'm going to place that equal to x. So far, if I quickly go back to the question, this is what we've done. So I have made sure that the program was empty. Sorry, the grid was empty, and then x is placed randomly in a place which is not x, which is not 1 and 1. All right, now let's do this. Now let's start working on the next thing, and that is let's start making sure that the player is playing. So for that, let's initialize our things. For example, Okay, so yeah, so for example, now I know what I have. I can create a constant. I believe you understand. It's always good practice to do this. I know player moves are going to stay constant at 7. So the number of moves that I'm allowed. So I can say that. In fact, did they mention the name? Let's quickly go back and check. No, they just said move. So I can just say constant um, moves allowed equals 10. All right. And the player is going to start, and I can say that player moves, which means the number of moves the player has done right now. So I can just say player moves, it starts at 0. All right. And in fact, before this, let me write on a comment here, and I'm going to say initializing my variables slash values. Okay, so I can say I've got player moves equals 0. All right. And then I can say the player row, or I can actually say current row that the player starts in. The player is actually going to start in one, and then, the row keeps on changing. Then I can say the current column is basically another one. You getting what I'm saying? Because remember this are on top that I'm going to start at 1 and 1, and I'm going to make sure that the player is in that particular, it's starting from the current row and current column, the 1 and 1. And the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to say, is I can say that when equals false. So the player has not won yet. So now what do I want to do? Now, think about it. I want to make sure that the whole game is played till either the player wins or, you know, the number of moves are done. So let's do this. So I'm gonna say that playing the game till either, player wins, of course, I will stop if the player wins, or the player loses, and the player is definitely gonna lose if, you know, maximum moves exceeded. All right. So let me write down, sorry, let me write down a quick loop for that. You can do any, by the way. You can use while, you can use repeat until. I'm more fond of using while loops. I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna say while when equals false, which means the player has not won yet, and while when equals false, that I need to make sure both conditions are true. I want to continue with that. So while when equals false and the, what did we call it? We call it player moves. And player moves are lesser than moves allowed. Okay, as long as this is, what are we going to do? You know, I want to actually now think about it. And that's why commenting is super important, super crucial right here. So what I want to do is I want to now actually get what I want to get the player move and check if the move is correct. And very importantly, what I want to do is I want to make sure that, the move that the player does, it needs to be correct. What do I mean by move being correct is because, see, let's say, let's say if, just a sec, um, let's say, let me just copy this and place this below again. So for instance, let's say I don't know, maybe I was, in fact, two situations that can happen for the player move to be incorrect. One is that I'm allowed to move what? It says I'm allowed to move left, right, up, or down, which makes sense. Now I can go up, down, left, right, which actually is fine. What if I press some other key? That's a wrong move. So that's one. And the other thing is that let's say I start off here and I want to go left. Now that should not be allowed. Let's say I'm over here, I want to go right, and that should not be allowed. Similarly, let's say if I'm here, I want to go here, that should not be allowed. So I'll need to take care of these particular situations. So for this thing, we can actually, we can actually, we will need to take care of this. So let's do this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, let's say in the beginning, hopefully, that I'm going to start off by saying that the player is not making a mistake. So I can say move error is equals to false, which means that I'm going to start off assuming that the player does not make an error in moving. All right. Then I'm going to ask the user for the input, and I can just put that in any particular place. So I can probably say something like, I don't know, I can say that player choice, and I'm going to stick to following a way which is kind of similar to the way we do it in Python. I think it's all self-explanatory. So I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to say input, and I'm going to say please enter your move. And when I do this, I'm gonna actually tell it, what each one of them stands for. I'm going to say L is for left, R for right, U for up, and D for down. So the player is going to enter any one of these moves. Okay. Now, I firstly want to make sure. So see, remember we've actually said this. Um we've actually said this that we want to make sure that the whole of this process keeps on repeating till I don't have a move error. So I want to make sure that there is no move error that actually exists. And with the help of that, I will um, make sure that we have the right move and we are not even going outside the given box like I explained. So this whole process will need to be repeated. All right. And I can use multiple constructions as I could have gone for a while loop. So let's do that. So I'm going to say while. Let me use a different color. That'll be better. So I'm going to say while move error equals false. So that means I will keep on repeating the whole of this process, till move error equals false, which means if there is no problem in the move error, okay? Because if definitely if there's a problem in the move error, I don't need to continue doing any of this. So, all right. So let's go on. So I ask for the player choice, and then I think the first player choice, the first thing I can do is I'm gonna say if I can use a simple player choice, and I can say if player choice is not equal to you, all right, or player choice. Remember, whenever we creating a composite condition, I hope you know that you have to repeat these over and over again. I mean, I cannot just go on and just like say or D or this. I need to repeat the whole statement again. So I'm gonna say if the player choice is not equals to U, the player choice is not equals to D, or player choice is not equal to L, or player choice is not equal to R, then what does that mean, guys? It means that he's made a mistake, right? So I'm just gonna say then move error. Okay, I'm gonna say move error in that case is going to be true. Okay. So I'll make sure. So what's gonna happen is that I'm gonna make sure that the move error is basically true, and which means that he's actually made an error moving. in the moves, So so if he's made an error in the moves, I want to make sure that, all of this keeps on repeating. Are you getting what I'm saying? And in fact, I should also change this. I should actually make this, keep this as true in the beginning, and I'm going to say while move error equals true. While move error equals true. Why? Because if move error is true means that he's made a mistake, and if he's made a mistake, I want to keep on asking for the user input. So over here, I'm going to make sure if it's not equals to this, all right. In those cases, of course, I'm going to keep move error equals true. Else, else, now if I'm going to check the second error. The second error was if am I going outside am I going outside the box? Okay, and I'm going to go outside the box if, remember, if the current row or current column is lesser than 1 or if it is greater than 5. Because remember, within 1 to 5, I'm all right. If I'm outside of it, then I'm going beyond this. So I'm going to now check. So if, the first thing I figured out that if it's none of this problem, then it means my move error is fine. So now I'm going to check. And I'm going to check for the next error. And I'm going to say that if else, and I'm going to say if, in fact, let's actually firstly, let me just calculate the player choice, which was, we called it current row and current column actually, sorry. So I'm going to say current row if player choice equals u. So guys, if the player choice was equal to u, then what does that mean? That means I'm moving up. So my column should go up. Where should my column go? You know, think about it. My column, if I'm moving up, so let's say I was on this thing. If I'm moving up, then does my column change? No. But does my row change? So if I'm moving from 2 to 1, so if I'm moving up, my row decreases by 1. So I'm gonna say, what did we call it? We call it current row. I'm gonna say current row equals current row minus 1. All right. And then I'm gonna check elif. I'm gonna say else if player choice equals down, then I'm gonna say current row, sorry, yeah. So if it's down, so I'm going down, remember, my current row is going to increment by 1. So I'm gonna say current row plus 1. You could have done this using a case of construct as well, but the reason I'm doing this way is because I feel like a lot of people are a lot more comfortable with a lot of people. Oops, what did this happen? Current row. A lot of people are a lot more comfortable with using if else. So I feel like you should kind of stick to that. So up, down, if I'm moving left, then remember, again, if I could go back, if I'm moving left and right, so if I'm moving left and right, my row stays the same. Let's say I was on 3 row, but my column changes by plus 1 or minus 1. So I'm saying if player choice equals left, then I can say current column equals current column left is what? Think about it. Minus 1, right? Else if player choice equals right, then I'm gonna say current column equals current column plus 1. So if I'm moving to the right, current column goes plus 1. All right, now I've made these changes, but I also want to make one thing sure, guys. And the thing that I want to make sure is that these columns, like once I make these changes, I want to make sure that these columns are what? These rows and columns, they don't go beyond. So I want to take care of the other error as well. So how am I going to do that? Let me just quickly end if. So this else if, it actually ends here. Now I want to make sure that my, I want to make sure that I don't I don't make a mistake in exiting the whole box that we were just talking about. I want to make sure that we stay within those bounds. So how can I do that? So I'm gonna say, once I've done this, I'm gonna say end if here, and I'm gonna do what? I'm gonna save this in like, so remember, when I make these changes, so I did current row is current row minus one, so on and so forth. I made these changes, all right? And because I made these changes, I will be losing the track of where my current row and current column was. So before this, what I'm gonna do is that I'm actually gonna save these somewhere. So for instance, let's say over here before this, I'm gonna say, I can say temp column equals current column, and I can say temp row equals current row that we're talking about. So that way I have them stored just in case I need it later on, which I'm just gonna show you. So now once I'm done with this, I wanna make sure that I wanna check that I have not gone beyond, what I was supposed to go. So I'm gonna say if, now think about it for a moment. I'm gonna say if my um let's say I'm gonna say if my current row is greater than 1, greater than equal to 1, and current row is less than equal to 5, that means I'm fine, you know. Then I means that, I'm just gonna say that there was no issue. All right. So if I was within this, or then I'm gonna say that there is, in fact, let's do the other way around. It's gonna make it easier. So if current row is less than 1 or current row is greater than 5, which means that now I'm gonna say there is an error. So I'm gonna say move error, it's going to become true. Okay. And the other thing that I'm gonna do is that I now want to restore my current row that I had saved before. So I'm gonna call it the temporary row that I saved before. All right. And if, of course, and I want to also check the column. So I'm going to say if current column that I done it's less than 1 or current column is greater than, in fact, let's use an, okay, okay. So I'm going to say current column is less than 1 or current column is greater than 5. Then what do I do? The same thing. I'm going to say move error equals true because it's still true. And I'm going to say my current row, sorry, not current row. I'm going to say my current column equals to the temporary column that we have. So far what I've done, think about it. So far what I've done is I've taken care of the row. I've taken care of the column, and I'm assuming if none of this happens, which means if all of this is correct, all right, if all of this is correct, so till this point, till this point, if none of this was there, if even if after this my move error was still if I want to make sure that, just a sec, when I enter this, I'm going to firstly assume that I'm putting my move error equals to false. Okay. Why am I putting this? Because I'm assuming the user, after all of these, I'm just going to say that after all of these things that happen, the user does not make a mistake. So I'm going to check that if there was no mistake, that means everything all right, right? So I'm going to say if move error is still false after all of this attempt. So move error is still false. Then what does that mean? That means everything is actually happening correctly, right? And I'm just going to go on and check. I'm just going to go on and check if the user has won or not. Okay. So now I'm going to check if move error is false. Only then I'm going to check. I'm going to say if grid the current row comma current column equals X. Then the best scenario, and the best scenario is I'm gonna say I'm gonna output or print, like both would work fine, player wins. All right. Else I'm gonna check. Else I'm gonna check, and in fact I also need to increment. I'm gonna now check for the number of moves that the user has actually done. So I'm gonna say if, where did we save it? We called it in a variable called player moves. So I'm going to say that if player moves are greater than 10, then because he's allowed only 10 moves, if they've gone beyond 10, if player moves are what? Think about it. If player moves are greater than 10, yes. So if player moves are in fact lesser than 10 still yet, still they're less than 10, then what do I do? Sorry, player move is less than 10, then I'm going to increment it by 10, by 1, sorry. And over here, remember, we also said on top, we're going to exit the loop when win is false. So I'm going to also make win equals true here. Output player wins, and I'm going to make win equals true here. And then I say if player move is lesser than 10, then player move equals player plus 1. So I increment it by 1. And then this whole loop keeps on repeating. So this is my end if for this one. This is my end if for the one on top. This is my end if for this one. And I've got two while loops, one in red and the other in blue. So the whole while loop keeps on repeating. So I'll need to do my end while here. So I do my end while for that one. And then what I do is I do my end while for the main one on top. Now, after this, all of this thing actually keeps on happening. And the last thing I'm going to check is I'm going to check that I'm going to say that if win equals false, I mean, even still, if win equals false, I mean, even if I've gone through the whole of the process and I never got to this place where win was actually gone equals to true, I'm going to say output you lose and then end if, right? So now if I go back and I quickly check, if I go back and I quickly check this, you know, let's go back to my checklist that we made right on the way top. So let's just think about it. So I'm going to start marking it off. So it says the program was supposed to fill in place an X in a random cell, not grid 1. We did that. empties all of that, we did that. The player starts top left, we did that. We made sure take care of the 10 moves. The player can move left, right, up, down, took care of that, and then move be within the grid. We already took care of making sure that it's within the grid by making sure that we are taking care of the +1 and the -1, and then making sure that it doesn't go beyond 1 and 5 for each one of them. The player can move left, right, up, down. You win is displayed if the player moves to cell X and 10 moves or less. So we did that. You lose is played if player has made 10 moves without finding the X. So we've already taken care of all of these things as well. Now, a few things that we can add up now real quick is that we'll add up the comments. So let's do this, the last thing. And over here, we'll add a comment. I'll say making sure player move changes the row and columns. All right. Over here, I'm gonna add a making sure the player stays within the box. All right. And then lastly, we're gonna say checking when if within bounds. And of course, over here, what we're doing, we're incrementing moves. So what we're doing, we're incrementing moves. Now, I know this is a pretty long question, and you generally need to spend quite a lot of time doing this, but I hope this makes sense. And yeah, thank you.